inventory sheet. This you can actually just set aside right now. Eventually, I would like you to go through and make sure that every document here is in your packet. If not, we can arrange to get copies like that for you. But right now, you don't know what we haven't gone through what any of the documents are, so that's a little difficult to go through. So we'll just set that aside for a second, or in the back. I know it's kind of hard with sitting in chairs. The bread and butter of the wheat and potatoes, I should say, of this packet is this, the 2020 Precinct Caucus Guidebook. If you can pull this out, it's an 18-page document. It should say your precinct and your name at the top, as well as the delegates and alternates that you get for each of the different conventions. All right. What I think I'll do, if everybody's okay with this, is I'm going to walk through this, and I will reference the different documents that are also in your packet as we get to them, going through when you would need them on the night of caucuses. So I'm going to have you jump to page 3 here, which is preparation before caucus night. And huzzah, you guys have already done step 1, which is attend the convener training in person if possible. The convener training obviously is today. In this page here and all over this packet. Oh,
Sorry, is there,
It should look like this.
okay, I don't have this thing. I have this thing.
Okay.
All by itself.
Oh, it might still be in,
Yep, here it is. There you go.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, so step 1 you've done. 2 things I'm calling out here is my contact information and Isaac Russell's contact, who is our chair. Information is here. You'll also find it peppered throughout this document. If you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us. I am always tied to my phone, so text whenever. I'm always available. The other thing that you can do that really helps out, it's not a requirement, but it is something that makes the night go smoother, is to recruit a helper to assist you with running the caucus. You can also ask people as they come into your room if they'd be interested in helping. Get in touch with your site coordinator. Where's okay, well, we did have a site coordinator here. There are going to be people who their main job will be to get in touch with the site, make sure that access to elevators is available. All those details are up and going, and they'll have, we do want to make our caucuses child friendly because for accessibility reasons, we can't offer childcare because you have to have certified childcare providers, and the site has to be certified, and it just, the moment that we started adding up the dollars, it got prohibitive really quickly on our shoestring budget. So we can't unfortunately offer childcare as an accessibility option, but site coordinators will have crayons and coloring books and some other entertainment items for folks who need to bring their kids with them. They'll also have extra tape, extra signs, all that sort of stuff. So if there's anything that you need, you can reach out to your site coordinator and they'll have supplies galore. The next thing we're going to do is that inventory sheet that was the first one there. As we go along here, or maybe when you get home, there is a column called convener check on this. What you want to do is go through and make sure that all the items that are listed on that are included in your packet. If not, call me or Isaac and we'll get those to you. Just so you know, this is the first one. This is your 2020 Precinct Caucus Guidebook. On the night of caucus, what you'll do is get there usually around 6:30 or so, or 6 o'clock or so. You'll want to set up kind of 2 areas on your table. So the first area is a registration area. There is a, bear with me, caucus affirmation sign This is everybody who attends caucuses says that they agree with these basic principles and are DFL people. You're gonna wanna put pens for attendees. Everyone should have a map like this showing your precinct boundaries. You can put that up on the wall or on the table, however you feel. And then if somebody comes in and is in the wrong location, there's a packet of information here where it shows all the different precinct conveners on the front page and the site coordinators on the second page, huzzah. And then it shows all the different districts and where they are convening. So if somebody is in the wrong location or needs to go to a different room in your location, they can find that out. So all of these are here and color coded by location. So you'll want that on your kind of registration area. And then blank registration sheets. Unfortunately, we are going low tech this year. Well, actually more fortunately, after everything that Iowa has been through, we don't want to do the same. So we have got paper sign-in sheets. People will fill out their information here. Each precinct should have about 3 or so. If you need more, feel free to give me a call and I can drop some off with you. We've got plenty in supplies. But this will be used by people as they sign in, and then eventually your caucus secretary will take these to keep track of who gets elected or nominated for which different positions. Then there's an area to kind of have an information table. This is where we put all of our, as I affectionately like to call it, the wonky stuff. So, for instance, you'll have your DFL official call, explaining the kind of caucus and convention procedures. You'll have your official DFL platform, ooh, pretty, nice and printed. Your DFL constitution and bylaws. If anybody gets really interested in checking particular rules and such. You'll also have 2 letters, one from our Senate caucus and one from the House caucus. Just introducing that themselves and thanking everybody for coming. Then we'll have, everybody should have pens and Post-it notes. If you need spare ones, again, let us know. Your site coordinators will have plenty available. The caucus agenda and sample rules is another one that you'll put there. And that one looks like this. And then at the very end of the bottom of the stack, there are forms that look like this. These are some blank resolution forms and a non-attendee participant form. So if somebody stops by but they need to leave early but they still want to be able to run for a spot or something, they can fill out one of these forms. We'll go over that a little bit more in a bit, but just wanted to show that. So have that on your information table. And then you've got a series of signs that you can post for folks if they want to take a picture of it or just get the information right in their phones. The first is signs for our DFL district, or for our Senate District 63 convention. The second is for the Minneapolis convention. Now Richfield folks, you won't have that. Richfield folks will have a sign for the Hennepin County convention because the seat for District 5, I believe, is up for election there. Minneapolis folks, if you really want to go to the Hennepin County DFL convention, if somebody there is super excited to vote on rules and regulations, have at it, but I highly doubt anybody is there to want to vote on the bylaws or the rules for the convention. So anyways, and then we've also got our Senate District 63 pre-convention committee meetings. So we'll go over those committees in a little bit, but these are the, each person should have 3 posters for the 2 conventions and 1 committee meeting that you can hang up using the wonderful blue tape that we provided. It doesn't do any damage to the walls, so people can't get cranky about it. The other thing that we wanna hang in a prominent spot, putting on caucuses is expensive, and running as many volunteer events as we can, issue forums, all sorts of things within our Senate district gets the money, it costs a lot. So we've set up an Act Blue webpage for our Senate district, and if people just want to scan this QR code, it will take them directly to that page. So if they don't have cash or checks, they can donate this way electronically. Huh? We are, yes. So I've included a fundraising script in there, so if you don't wanna, you can speak extemporaneously about it, or you can just follow the words that we wrote if you'd rather. I'm trying to look, oh, yes.
I just wanted to mention that there's a QR scanner on the home screen of Apple phones,
Yes,
and so it's super easy to do. I just learned that the other day.
yeah. Oh, and Android phones now have it built into their camera, which is super nice. So that people don't even have to get an app, they just have to hold up their phone to look at it. We also use these sometimes to send emails to
Should we
legislators and
demonstrate
stuff.
how it works?
Hmm?
You wanna demonstrate? So all you have to do is open up your camera on your phone and just point it at this code, right?
Yep.
And then a link will pop up and you just click on the link and it'll take you right to the download, to the donation page.
And the nice part is, again, if there's a political campaign refund, so you donate $50 per person, $9 per couple, you get that money back from the state. And that can go to Senate districts.
Up to $50, right?
So it's $50, yep, up to $50 for an individual and up to $100 for a couple.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Huh? Oh,
I
yeah.
said when we got there.
So is this a ballot box or envelope?
Yes, that is,
Did we just bring something or like?
yeah, that is something we would have you, if you wouldn't mind providing just a regular envelope, letter-sized envelope, if you wouldn't mind including that. I'm sorry, I forgot to include those in the packet.
Oh, I don't have a worry about, I just didn't know what typically people use or what, like.
Yeah, and honestly, some people use nothing, they just have the tellers hold them in their hands. It's just if you've got a larger precinct with more attendees, it might be easier to have an envelope or a box or something, but it's not something that you have to have.
Okay, great.
So we've got, oh, and then if you are able to, using Post-it notes or blank paper, if it's difficult to find the restrooms in your school, we do recommend posting directions to that. Just avoids people needing to be away and wandering around trying to figure out where they're going and whatnot. On the B side of our districts, the 63B, there is a contested election this year. There are 5 candidates running for the House seat. So there will likely be a lot of candidate literature there. Likewise, as you saw with Patricia Torres-Ray, she dropped off some literature to pass out to people so they know how to contact her. And Jim Daphne, who's running for the 63A seat, will likely do the same. You can just include that on the table as well. And then each precinct has about 5 Post-it pads. If you'd like more, let me know, but just put one of those on each table. Later on in the night, we'll use those for our ballots. So just have people write their votes on it and then pass it in accordingly. All right, so going over to the next page here, this is not a hard and fast schedule, but kind of gives you an idea of all the different points that you want to hit. So 6 o'clock, we recommend getting there to set up the room and such. At 6:30, people can start signing in on the blank paper forms. If anybody complains, just tell them we'd be grateful we're not in the news, because nobody wants that many CNN trucks outside. Then from 7 o'clock to 7:20, it'll be going over some of the basics of DFL participation. So we'll read a letter from Ken Martin, do introductions and greetings within our caucus. approve the agenda and rules, read the participation and eligibility requirements, our affirmative action, outreach and inclusion statement, the DFL platform statement, and then the the fundraising request from 63 with, again, like I said, we'll have a script there. From 7:20 roughly to 7:30, that's when we work on elections of caucus personnel, so caucus chair, which generally defaults to the convener, but doesn't always, it doesn't have to, so somebody may choose to run for caucus chair, that is just for this night. Caucus secretary, same thing, and then at least 2 tellers. We'll also make an appeal. Teller is just somebody who counts ballots and keeps track of time. We also make an appeal for folks to serve as election judges. All they have to do is sign their name on an election judge form, which is towards the back of your packet. It will look like this. They don't have to do anything tonight or even in the near future. They'll be, their information will be sent to the state DFL, and they'll reach out to them around election time to see if they're interested in serving as judges. So. Then at 7:30, which I put a note here, it must not start before 7:30. That is when we start electing delegates. We elect delegates to the 63 convention, the Minneapolis City Convention, or the Hennepin County Convention, and we consider resolutions, entertain speeches from candidates as they come around, and any other business that may arise. The earliest that you can adjourn is 8 o'clock. We cannot end before that. So finally, if you're running out of the form or have any questions or anything like that, again, in this gray box, my information and Isaac's information is available. Additionally, feel free to ask in the room. A lot of people who come to precincts have been attending, or a lot of people who come to precinct caucuses have been attending for years, and are more than happy to help out and provide insight and such. Yeah.
Really quick, how do the elections happen if you have more people who want to be delegates than spots?
Good question. We will get to that in just a
Oh, okay.
second.
I thought we were done.
Oh, no. I'll talk quick, but I can't talk that quick.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
What is the role of the precinct chair and vice chairs?
So precinct chairs and vice chairs are folks who are going to be getting engaged in their precinct, identifying Democrats who live in the area. They also serve on the Senate District 63 Central Committee. So we meet about once a month to work on planning conventions and caucuses, getting door knocks going, get out the vote efforts, and then working on resolutions that are based on the DFL platform. So as an example, right now, one of the big things that we're working on is a resolution to work on protecting public housing in Minneapolis, and that sort of thing. So things that are aligned with the DFL platform, we work with our electeds and other local officials to pursue the DFL platform as we find it.
And then adjourned to Merlin's Rest.
Oh, yes, and it's a 2-year term. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, adjourned to Merlin's Rest.
Yeah.
The most.
Yes. Any other questions at all?
This is gonna be a dumb question, but
There are none.
has it been 2 years since the last caucus?
Yes.
Okay, so it's been 2 full years.
Yeah, the last caucuses were in 2018. All right, so to convene the caucus, you'll need a good knuckle. We can't give everybody gavels, so just bang on the table.
Or you could just use your shoe.
That too. If anybody wants to take the Kennedy route, you can do that. Yeah.
I have a question. The sign-in sheets are all blank. In
Yes.
previous years, we've had pre-printed lists of previous caucus attendees.
Yeah, and because of the Iowa stuff, we've decided not to use those, because
Okay.
those have barcodes that we'd have to scan then, and yeah, just,
Thank you.
yeah, there are some Senate districts that are still using them. I'd rather try and read handwriting than deal deal with electronic registration issues, so, that's on us. You guys are not responsible for reading handwriting or anything like that. The data entry happens, afterwards, you just have to turn in the details.
I feel like we're gonna need to have a lot more pages, not that we're necessarily gonna fill them, but
Yeah.
I just remember that's the issue, that if there's only 2 pieces sitting out there, that the line gets so long, that's always the complaint.
Okay.
So even if we have 15 sheets going, at least people aren't waiting in line, just something.
No, that's a good point. So yeah, we did give everybody 3 sign-up sheets, so you can have 3 lines going. If you'd like to make more copies or request more copies, feel free to do so. Even if you've only got 2 or 3 people on each page, that still works. Yes.
Do you have to use the official registration forms, or can you put out like a legal pad or something like that?
You can put out a legal pad if anything, if you run out of the official forms. All right, so that kind of gets us into our business section for the Caucus agenda script. That's, greet attendees, confirm that they're in the right precinct. You can show them to the map and to the different precinct maps and such. They can sign up in their sheet and fill out as completely as possible. We do need emails and phone numbers for everybody who plans to run for a delegate. If they don't want to give that information, we can't certify them as a delegate because we need to be able to reach them.
What if they don't have a phone or something?
I've never encountered that, but that's a good question. Has anybody who's convened before ever encountered that, or no?
I would say it's the responsibility of the chair then to commit to go to the person's house and give them the information.
Okay, yeah, if that's the case, maybe just get their address. And then you can show them the information and the candidate literature. If anybody drops off a non-attendee participation form, just keep it with you, the chair, the convener. We'll need to consider that later during the delegate elections.
Maybe those will be available online too, right?
Yes.
For people who can't come?
Yep,
Because I'm
we'll
gonna
be
send out some information about precinct to encourage people, but if they can't attend, then you want to be part.
Yeah, I'm gonna be scanning one of those and putting it on our Facebook page. So that way, anybody who can't attend, they can send that with a neighbor or something. So then when you convene the caucus, you're gonna wanna introduce yourself to them. You can include a brief description of your DFL involvement. Ask if there's any newcomers or, experienced folks in the room. Encourage people to ask questions whenever there's something they don't understand. And explain that your role as convener is to get the caucus started, and later people will elect a caucus chair. Usually it's the convener, but it's the same person as the convener, but occasionally it can be somebody else who decides they want to run the caucus. So we've included a suggested script here. So just throughout this packet, anything that is a suggested script will be in italics. Anything that has to be read exactly as written will be in bold and italics. Feel free to, like I said, feel free to read the suggested scripts verbatim as well, if you're, word for word as well, if you're interested. Otherwise, you can also, if you feel comfortable with public speaking or have done this a lot, you can add your own items in there as you feel needed. So I like to include information just saying, the precinct caucus is the first step in the DFL endorsement process of candidates for local, county, and state office. A lot of people probably have questions about where the presidential race aligns in there. What I like to say is we caucus for Congress, we primary for president in Minnesota. And that's just, it's not a all-encompassing thing, but it kind of helps people to understand the differentiation. That we do have a primary for our presidents, but everything else we do caucuses for.
Primary for our governor too, right?
Technically we caucus for the governor as well, but there is a primary. But that's not this year, that'll be 2 years from now.
More of an endorsement.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but for this year, for all intents and purposes, it's caucus for Congress, primary for president. This year, the caucus convention process, it's a two-step process culminating in the state convention. So precinct caucuses elect delegates to the Senate District 63 convention, the Minneapolis convention, if you're in Minneapolis, or the Hennepin County convention if you're in Richfield. At the Senate District 63 convention, delegates from that pool will be selected for the Minnesota State Convention, as well as the CD5, the Congressional District 5, where you're voting on an endorsement for the seat that Ilhan Omar currently occupies. Yep.
Maybe you'll get to this, but when you said there's tellers who count,
Ballot, yeah.
what, we don't have a straw poll for president, or what are they counting
I'm
for?
glad you asked.
They're counting the votes for delegates and for resolutions. If there's more people who want to run as a delegate than there are spots available, you'd need to do a vote or a walking sub-caucus. And so they'd be responsible for checking those ballots.
Okay, alright. So there's only like if you have 24 delegates?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the whole presidential thing where there's hundreds and hundreds?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
Yeah, it does make our job significantly easier to not have to do the presidential polling.
yeah.
So that is nice. Alright. Additionally, precinct caucuses pass resolutions telling the DFL what issues are important to us as part of our party platform. Well, there's a formal process and a set of rules. Our goal is to create an atmosphere that is welcoming and understandable. So feel free to ask questions if you don't understand what's happening or how to participate in the process. And then ask as an order of business if anybody has any non-attendee forms. We just want to make sure that we don't miss any of those, because we want everybody to feel included and have the caucuses are as accessible as possible. Next, we suggest that you include this paragraph as a way to handle when candidates stop by and if they want to speak to the caucus at all. We suggest you. Next, be aware that candidates and elected officials may be dropping by the caucus to introduce themselves and give a brief speech about their work. On the suggestion of the SD63 DFL Executive Board, I will entertain a motion to adopt the rule which allows us to pause current business when they drop by and allow them to speak for 2 minutes and then 2 minutes for questions. That phrase is really helpful if you're trying to make a suggestion within your caucus. So instead of having to make the motion yourself, which the convener and the chair cannot do, you can say, I will entertain a motion to this effect, and see if anybody offers to make that motion. So it's a good way to offer suggestions. In this case, we do want to hear from our candidates for public office, but we also want to make sure that we're not there until midnight or later. So this is a good way to make sure that you still hear from everybody and are able to answer questions, but not go overboard. Next, we've got the greeting from Ken Martin, who's the Minnesota DFL chairman. That does need to be read verbatim, so it's just a little welcome message to everybody. Then after that, you can do introductions. If there's fewer than 15 attendees, feel free to just have everybody announce their name and information as you go around the room. Otherwise, just ask them to introduce themselves to their neighbors at the tables or whatever that they're at. We do formally need to ask the caucus to approve the agenda. That is, I showed just a moment ago, but I'll hold it up again once I find it. That is this sheet. So we'll need folks to formally approve the agenda and the rules listed here. They're just some basic rules. We did not add anything to them or anything unique.
Is that a separate sheet in the packet?
It is,
Okay.
yes. And then you'll wait for a motion in a second, any discussion, et cetera, motion passes. Usually there's no complaints there. In the past, I have heard of situations where people have offered rules about civility, and that is totally within your right to entertain a rule to that effect. Just as a side note, sometimes you may encounter folks who are a little bit more passionate and less sensitive on certain issues than others. Some instances that I've experienced have been for folks who are non-binary genders and that sort of thing. You, as the caucus convener and the caucus chair, have full discretion and will have the complete backing of the Senate District 63 exec board and all of our higher-ups to insist upon civility, recognition, and making things accessible for anybody within your caucus. So if people have recommendations about civility or requesting different accommodations, feel free to do that at your discretion and to make that kind of statement. If you're getting challenged in any way, again, just pull out the phone and call me or Isaac. We'll be happy. I'll be driving around that night, so I will be happy to stop by and, yeah. Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned folks like non-binary gender, because
Yes.
I think one thing to do that is helpful is just, like when I'm introducing myself, use my pronouns, Dave Snyder, he, him, and encourage people to share the pronouns that they're using in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about assigning delegates and you talk about gender balance, just mention, like, we're also really interested in making sure that people who identify as trans or non-gender conforming, like non-binary, are welcome. Like that happened with at ours, and we ended up having somebody who was trans who like then became a delegate or
Yeah.
something. So.
And that is one thing that I've made sure to include in the script, that we use the phrase different genders instead of opposite genders. So that way we're not being excluding folks who are non-binary or trans or that sort of thing. So, but yeah, we will read the affirmative action, outreach, and inclusion statement many times throughout the night, but again, just know that you have the full backing of the SD63 executive board to make sure that everybody is respectful and accepting in your caucus. And it is completely within your discretion if somebody is being belligerent or cruel or rude to somebody else who's an attendee, to ask them to leave. And if they have a problem with it, they can talk to me. Yes.
Amy, you were talking about that in relation to the rules. Do we actually need to have someone motion to adopt a rule to do that, or just say in this caucus we will be promoting civility and respect?
That's up to your choice. In some cases, I know folks feel more comfortable having it as a formal rule. In others, it's just kind of other people are just, okay, let's have just a basic understanding here. I just want everybody to know, in either case, you are empowered to do so, you are supported in doing so. We did have some experiences after our 2018 convention where some folks felt rather make sure that that is a focus and that is a priority for this year.
My recollection is the last time I convened, really was an issue of somebody felt compelled to try and figure out math on what is representative of if you are now saying somebody that is non-binary and male and female, and they were trying to figure out the math, and finally somebody said, can we just move on?
Mm-hmm.
And the group said, yes, we did. And I'm like, okay, because I'm like, I'm not gonna sit up there and say,
Yeah.
said representative.
Yes.
And we all arrived at representative, basically.
Yeah. And that is something we will include a statement where we try to maintain an even breakdown of genders. That doesn't always happen. Perhaps the volunteers are 5 males, 3 females, and 1 person who's non-binary. And there's 10 seats available. All of them would still get delegate spots. And we would just provide an explanation to the state committee, just saying that's the only people who volunteered. So if somebody gets really hung up on the math or focused on that, just let them know that this is a goal we aim for. This is not something that is hard and fast, and the state party has changed their language to reflect that it is not a requirement, it is just a goal. So it is something to influence our voting, but not something that is a requirement.
So there's something I just wanna also say, in regards to, you know, being representative, just maybe just to bug in someone's ear, is that, there's more ways to be representative than gender. So for instance, I sat in a caucus, a precinct caucus, and there was probably about 45 to 50 white people, it's the only black person. And while it's important to do gender balance, I'm
Yes.
just like, wait a minute now. Like that's, you know, let's not ignore all things. So I'm not saying that,
Oh, yeah.
there's one black person, let's put the black person on. What I'm saying is, you know, try to consider that, but I mean, again, it's like not, you're the one black person, you automatically go on. I'm not saying anything like that, but just, you know, more consider that representation also, please.
If anybody has any confusion about that, I recommend using a description about the difference between inclusivity versus quotas. So if you sit here and say, hey, we've got one person who's, you know, non-binary or black or immigrant or whatever diverse group, and so therefore we have to get them as a delegate, that's a quota. But if you say, hey, let's give a little bit extra weight to our consideration of somebody who is representing a diverse group or a less underrepresented community, that is an effort towards inclusion. And if anybody would like, I did not include that in the packet, but I can write that up and send it out if anybody would prefer to have that written out. But if you get any questions about that, that's kind of the way you can approach to explaining it. So not quotas, but inclusion. Yes?
Are we still supposed to use that phraseology of people, say, we're dealing with numbers, you say, well, we need 2 people who do not identify as men, 3 people who do not identify as women. That's what we were told last time around,
Yes.
and that was supposed to work. Does that work still?
That works still, yes.
And then, people were talking about he or she.
Yeah.
If you use they, which if it's good enough for Webster's, it's good enough for
Yes.
us.
Yes, exactly.
If you just say they, it just mean.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can have, you know, just say, you know, and they, thems, you know, we can look at equality between, you know, men and women, and then, but we're just not gonna worry about they, thems in this equation. So. All right, so that's something that may come up in the rules. If you want to adopt it as a formal rule, feel free. If you'd rather just have it as a guiding principle that you mentioned during introductions, that's possible as well. In any case, feel free to enforce civility and encourage it amongst your participants. So then we need to read the eligibility requirements. There's a whole page of stuff to read verbatim. So the participant eligibility requirements need to be read verbatim. And there's also a sign that will be on the wall. The affirmative action, outreach, and inclusion statement. This is going to show up multiple times as before we take votes, just to remind people to weigh inclusion of underrepresented communities in their vote, not to treat it as a quota, but to weigh it as, give those members extra consideration in their voting. We have a DFL platform statement, which if folks are interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of it, we do have the DFL platform in its entirety that will be on the info table. And then the fundraising request. This is coming from us at Senate District 63. I do want to go over one thing here. As Larry mentioned earlier, there is an option called PCR, which is the political campaign refund or reimbursement. The state of Minnesota wants everybody to donate to political causes and to be involved. So it actually has a complete fund set up where everybody in the state is free to give $50 as an individual or $100 as a couple to a cause that they see as important, and the state will pay you back for it. So we want to encourage people to take advantage of that and to donate to the Senate district. Inside there's a plastic bag, a Ziploc bag, in your packets that you will pass around for out-of-pocket donations. So just little bits of cash or coins or checks or whatever. But there is also a couple of envelopes in there. We encourage people to make their $50 donation to us. If they do so, they need to put it in that envelope. Either cash, check, or just notations about the donation that they made through Act Blue. Once they do that, the outside of the envelope, they need to write their name and address. We'll collect all of those and mail them a receipt. Yes.
Also their employer.
Oh, and their employer, sorry, yes. Name, address, employer. Once we get that in, we'll collect those at the end of the night from you, and our treasurer, Andy here, will then mail out a receipt to everybody so that they can fill out the form and receive their refund. It typically arrives in about 2 to 3 weeks from the state.
Why do you need an employer?
There was some trickery about 10 years ago where lobbying firms would give bonuses to their employees that they then donated to political causes.
It's just campaign finance law. You're supposed to know who's giving you money.
If someone's unemployed or they're.
That's fine.
That's fine, NA.
That's fine.
Doesn't apply. All right, so that is the fundraising request. Like I said, if anybody has any questions about that, feel free to give a call.
16 meetings to 16 by election day.
Yep. Caucus participation does not, is 16. Election participation is 18. But as caucuses, you can participate as teams. So if you know any high schoolers in your area, we encourage them to come. It's a great introduction into public process and civic engagement and such.
Can they hold,
Huh?
can they hold office like in the district too?
Yes, they can.
Oh.
Yep. They could even take my job. All right. Huh?
Dream on. Can I just say real quick, because this question came up in election judge training. You have to be 18 by the primary election if you want to vote in the primary, and you have to be 18 by the general election if you know.
Yeah.
But this is the exception, because a lot
Yeah.
of people are tingling these two up. So
Yes,
we're more
yeah, so
inclusive, if
primaries,
you will, in caucuses.
primaries are based on state law. Caucuses are based on party laws. So we want to encourage folks who are 16 and between 16 and 18 to get involved. So.
What if you're 17 and will be 18 by the, you can vote in the primary?
If you want to vote in the primary, you have to be 18.
By March 3rd.
By the primary, or by the August primary, or by the general election, you have to be 18 on that date, not.
Yes.
So to participate in the caucus, you also don't otherwise need to be eligible to vote, right? Like you don't need to be a citizen, you could have a felony record, you're eligible to all that, correct?
Yes, I believe so, yes. If you live here and you're 16 and you agree with the DFL and you're not a secret Republican or Green Party or independent, then you're good. So yes, felony records, immigrants, come all. All right, so the next step is that you're going to elect a caucus chair. 95% of the time, this is going to be you. I'll ask folks who have been here doing this a little bit longer, I don't think there's ever been a situation where the person who's been the convener gets, there's somebody in the audience who wants to take over that role. Huh?
I've seen it happen, but the person
Yeah.
running against them didn't win.
Yeah. So it could happen. We've got instructions here on how to handle that if it does. But most of the time, you nominate yourself, and then very rarely will people object and go after you or go oppose you. But there is a suggested script here if that does happen, so just follow the italics there. The second step is to elect a caucus secretary. Generally, you just need a volunteer, so there's some suggested script there on how to just solicit somebody, the first person to volunteer gets to be secretary kind of thing. This person will be responsible for taking basic notes about the night and keeping track on our sign-in sheets who gets elected to various positions like precinct chair and vice chair or delegates to the different conventions and such. So they will be handed the sign-in sheets, and they will keep some basic notes about the night, who made what motion, who seconded it, what the breakdown of the votes were, and general stuff like that. It does not have to be a full transcription of the night. You also need 2 tellers. Tellers are responsible for helping to count the votes. They do not need to count by hand votes or voice votes. They need to only help with paper ballots. Additionally, if a candidate for public office comes to give a speech, or people are making speeches related to a motion or a resolution or anything to that effect, they operate as timekeepers. So they should have access to a stopwatch on their phone or something like that. Next is asking for election judges. I briefly touched on this earlier. It's basically just asking if you would be interested in getting contacted to help in November. It isn't by no means a binding agreement. It's just getting your name on a list with the state party to reach out to you in August and September. So there's some text there that you can just follow word for word. Next, you need to elect precinct chairs and 2 vice chairs. So as mentioned, the precinct chair serves for about 2 years. Their job is to encourage engagement within their precinct, identify Democrats in the area, and look for ways to pursue the party platform within their area. You need to elect you do not have, if nobody volunteers for a precinct chair or vice chair, you do not have to elect one. But we do like to suggest or offer it up to people and get them engaged and involved and such. It generally does really improve our election turnouts and voter engagement and that sort of thing. So there's some suggested text here. We also need to elect 2 vice chairs. So Vice Chair 1 and Vice Chair 2. Should the precinct chair resign before their 2-year term is up, then Vice Chair 1 automatically gets made the precinct chair, and the other one moves up, and et cetera, et cetera. So in these cases, rarely is there any sort of contest, but if somebody is a very, very stickler for the rules, they may ask that the votes be a majority rather than a plurality. So plurality just means they have the most votes in a field of 3 to 5, how many other candidates they have the most. A majority means that you have more than 50% of the votes. If somebody insists upon doing a majority vote rather than a plurality vote, you would just whittle down the field by dropping the person with the least amount of votes until somebody gets more than 50%. It's also called first past the post type voting. But again, it's happened, but it's very rare that somebody will challenge you on that. Next, we get to the meat. This is electing Senate District 63 convention delegates. You cannot start this before 7:30, that is state rule, and your results could be called into question if you do. So do not start before 7:30 if you need to give people, give them something to talk about or something. And sure, there is always something in the daily news that you can generate plenty of conversation about, unfortunately.
Give them time to fill out resolutions.
Yes, good point. So there's some required text here to say where we'll be electing delegates and alternates. Each script is tailored to your precinct, so don't swap scripts with one another, because it lets you know your particular allocated delegates and alternates and such. So it, for instance, the one that I'm reading right now says 45 delegates and 45 alternates on the middle of the page. Our convention will be held at Sanford Middle School. We've got the address there. If anybody asks for some more details about the candidates who are being, who will be voted on and such, I've included those details as some bullet points underneath each action item. Yes.
Oh, the date was posted earlier on the SD63 Facebook group as
April 4th. And I
Yes.
built a whole schedule around that. So
Yes.
this is correct now.
This is
April
correct.
4th is out.
So we had originally planned on April 4th. Unfortunately, there was a miscommunication with the building about some paperwork, and so our reservation was canceled.
Cool.
We did not find out about it until about a month ago, and so then we were able to find a different location, but for April 19th.
That's what worked good for you.
Thank you. So sorry for any confusion that causes. It may be a good idea to call that out or call some extra attention to that, that it is the 19th rather than the 4th. On the one advantage is this does give us an additional 2 weeks to prepare for it, but yeah, we did have to reschedule that, so I apologize profusely for any confusion that happens there. Alright, so most precincts will have a lot of delegate and alternate spaces. These are calculated based on the population of the precinct. Generally, I've only seen one instance where the number of delegates for a particular convention has exceeded the number of people, or where the number of delegate candidates has exceeded the number of delegate slots. So the majority of the time, you'll be in this no contest section where it talks about, you know, you can ask to entertain a motion that all those who indicated their willingness to serve as delegates to the SD63 convention will be elected as such. Yes.
Question about the balancing.
Yeah.
Let's say my little precinct only has 18 people attend, and we have 20 delegates, and let's say 7 of them are women, and 3 of them are non-binary, and 5 of them are men, or whatever, those are the people. I mean, we don't have to balance if we can't even fill.
Yes.
If we have to say, sorry, because we only have 5 of these and 3 of these, we can only have 5.
No, gender balancing is, as Isaac made a good point, gender balancing and balancing based on representation of communities is a goal, but it is not a binding thing. It is, in the instance, if there was a contested seat, then it would be something to be used as to weigh your consideration, but not something that is a hard and fast requirement. So if a contest exists, that means that you've got more delegate candidates than you have delegate seats. There are 2 methods that you can use to fill those seats. The first method is called walking sub-caucuses. The second method is paper voting. Appendix A, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have you jump to the last couple pages here. Appendix A goes over walking sub-caucuses. So I've actually included an example in this one, just to kind of explain the map, because it does get a little confusing. I hate to keep using Iowa as an example, but Iowa was the situation where there was a lot of confusion about which caucuses, or which sub-caucuses were considered viable and which ones weren't. So what ends up happening is attendees can suggest names for their sub-caucuses that define their alignment. So typically you can do it by candidate for the offices that you're going to be delegates in electing. You cannot, this is a state rule, you cannot name your sub-caucus after a presidential candidate. It actually will invalidate your results if you do. They want to have very clear lines between the presidential primary versus the caucus procedures. So just if anybody suggests a name, just please encourage them. So, for instance, and granted my examples here are previous presidents, but, or presidential candidates, but this is just for the example's sake. So, for instance, let's say we've got 4 different sub-caucuses that are being suggested. We've got the Wellstone sub-caucus, the Obama sub-caucus, the Clinton sub-caucus, and the Dukakis sub-caucus, because I like alliteration. So you'll read the affirmative action, outreach, and inclusion statement. So as you go today, remember that the DFL is committed to electing members of underrepresented communities positions both within the DFL and in public office. Discrimination on the basis of gender, age, religion, economic status, ethnic identity, national origin, color, sexual and affectional orientation, disability, or veteran status in the conduct of Minnesota DFL affairs is prohibited. Sorry, I just figured I'd go auction caller there.
Is it really that backwards?
I could try, that'd be a little bit harder. So each sub-caucus, people will get up and walk to a particular area. They'll be assigned an area in the room. Each person will get up and walk to the area for which caucus they align with. They're going to count how many people that they have. In addition, if there's any non-attendee participant forms that identify which or that do not identify which sub-caucus that they would prefer to join, then we have to treat them as an uncommitted sub-caucus. So then you have to confirm the viability of each sub-caucus. So what this means is you need to get a delegate to attendee ratio. So for instance, if you have 40 attendees and 12 delegates seats available, then your delegate to attendee ratio is 3.33. So that means that for a sub-caucus to be viable, they would have to have at least 3 people. We round if the number is uneven. So this tells you the minimum threshold that all sub-caucuses must meet to be considered viable. So in our example, the Dukakis sub-caucus has 2 people, so they are not a viable sub-caucus. So they will be dissolved, and those 2 people will then need to choose a different caucus to participate in. So after the Dukakis sub-caucus is dissolved, that's quite an alliteration there. Then you'll ask the sub-caucuses to report the new total number of people that they have. So for this example, the Wellstone sub-caucus has 22 people. We're going to figure out how many delegate seats that they get, we're going to divide that total, the 22 people, by the delegate to attendee ratio. 3.33, and we'll get a total of 6.61. So that means, rounding to the nearest whole number, that means that the Wellstone sub-caucus gets 7 delegates. The Obama sub-caucus has 14 people, divided by the DAR, they get 4.2, so they get 4 delegates. The Clinton sub-caucus has 4 people, so they get 1 delegate. So once each sub-caucus is told the total number of delegates that they get, it's up to them to determine how they want to select their delegates. As the chair, you do not have to guide them on that process. So within there, they can decide if they want to do votes, if they want to, any method that they so choose. They can figure that out. They also get to select an equal number of alternates. So the Wellstone sub-caucus would get 7 alternates. Obama sub-caucus would get 4 alternates, Clinton sub-caucus would get 1 alternate. So that's, once they figure out who gets those delegate seats for their sub-caucus, they need to tell the caucus secretary. That person will record it on the delegate report form, which is somewhere here. Delegate report form, note that it says delegate in the upper right corner because it looks very similar to a lot of these other report forms. So look to the upper right corner to figure out which one it is. Or we've got the alternates report forms.
When you say that the sub-caucuses have to define an alignment, isn't that the issue rather than?
So the question was whether, if sub-caucuses, they have to define an alignment and whether that can be, question was whether that sub-caucus can be an issue-based rather than a candidate-based. That certainly is possible. It does sometimes create some confusion within those ranks. Because one person may believe that X candidate supports the issue of healthcare better, and another person may believe that Y candidate supports the issue better. But it is a possibility if they would like to align on a particular issue rather than a candidate. It just has the potential to get messy.
So if we can't align each candidate, who do you align around, like?
The candidates for local office, so in the case of the Senate District 63, you can align around the candidates, in 63B, for instance, which is contested. I don't think 63A has anybody running against, but in 63B, you could have a Dent Caucus, Freeman, Ferguson, Evans, or Morales.
If it's not contested, like if it's Jim Dabney and no one else, what would you, how would the sub-caucuses differentiate?
Generally, in that case, they would do it around issues.
Oh,
It's just if you do have candidates running, it makes it a little bit more difficult if you do it around issues. So,
gotcha, okay.
any other questions on walking sub-caucuses? Yeah.
So those say you can't have the presidential candidate's name, so if there was anyone but Trump's sub-caucus, it wouldn't be allowed.
That is correct.
I think everyone
Technically,
would-
he's a presidential
Yeah.
candidate.
Come on, right, you know,
Yeah,
you're like.
that's a good, yeah, good workout. On the forms, so you're saying that, so like if we could elect 41 delegates, should I have enough?
I thought we got enough forms for everybody. If we did not, let me know and I'll get more copies to you. Or again, if you've got a home printer, feel free to make copies yourself as well. Or if you need to, you can use the white space on the back of it to report the information too. The second method of deciding delegates is what we call, I think slate voting is a name that I gave it, but I think that might be a bad name now that I look at it. So let's just call it paper voting. This is a very simple one. You ask all the candidates, the delegate candidates, to announce their names and write them on a wall or a blackboard or wherever there is. You would also include any non-attendee participants. If they indicated on their form that they would like to run for a delegate position, you would put their name up there as well. If there is a desire from the attendees to hear from each candidate, you can allow them to speak. I generally recommend keeping that to under a minute, because it'll get long, especially with some of these delegate pools that are, upwards of 40 people and such, or 40 slots. That's where your post-it notes come in. You're going to have all attendees write out their choice for delegate. Each attendee can list as many names as there are delegates allotted. So if you've got 15 delegate spots allotted, they can write out 15 names. The tellers are going to collect the ballots and do a simple tally of the votes for each person. So there's no waiting for first or second choice or anything. If that person ended up in the pool of 15, they get one tick mark. The candidates then get arranged in the order of least to most vote, or most to least votes. The top of the list, the people who got the most votes, will fill the delegate slots until the delegate slots are filled, and then they will go over and fill the alternate slots until those alternate slots are filled. When those people are assigned, you just give them you fill out their information on the delegate report form and the alternate report form. You can give them a convention call postcard. No, this one is the one. There's two postcards. This one is actually the pre-convention, but it'll look like this. Just have the logo on the left side instead of the right side. So that's actually a side note that I want to make. Both your SD63 convention and the pre-convention committee, these are called calls. It's just a little reminder for people. If they want them, they can take them. They don't have to. They are both black text on white paper, because that's what my printer could do. But for the convention, the logo is on the left side. For the pre-convention committees, the logo is on the right side. So just to make it a little different. Huh?
That's pretty nice.
my black and white printer?
No, the
Oh,
on the alternate sides of the page.
yeah, thank you.
So
Yes.
they should get one.
Just one. If they're running for the convention,
Okay.
they would just get the convention call. Again, most people won't even want one. They'll just put it on their calendar. But if you want something to put on your fridge as a reminder or something, they can take one. Yes. Do what? And then.
Well, I can't find mine, but I don't wanna go rustling too, back too much.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you afterwards.
okay, yeah, and we can look through it. Yes.
Alternates are ranked,
Yes,
and so, and that paper method that you just described, when you ran out of delegate slots, then you would list the alternates according to how many votes they got.
yes, yes,
If you do that where the people agree to be alternates,
yeah,
and you don't really have an election, they still have to be ranked, correct?
yes, that's correct.
So is it just first come, first served, or?
No, it'll be, so, you know, you've got,
No, I mean
your delegate slots from here, so it's the person who gets the most votes, and then
But
progressively
if you
down.
don't, that's right,
Okay.
if you don't have an election though,
Oh, yeah,
How do you
say you
rank
got 44 delegates and you got 50 people,
okay,
but 6 of them agree to be alternates.
yes,
So you've got one list of delegates, they don't get ranked, but ranking those alternates,
yes.
is that done by agreement or first come, first served, or what?
That'll be something you'll wanna ask the alternates. So alternates are ranked, so alternate number 1 would be the first person up to replace somebody should a delegate not be able to make it. Alternate number 2 would be the second person picked if a delegate cannot make it. So there you can just ask if they have any preference about which alternate seat that they occupy, if they want to be first alternate, second alternate, third alternate, etc. Or you can ask if they just want to first come, first serve, whoever gets, just put our names down in order kind of thing. So there are some folks who may want to define their likelihood of getting called to replace a delegate. If that's the case,
As long as we're on it, in my experience, one way of encouraging this method is, which is a lot quicker, you get people to volunteer to be delegates, and then some of them agree to be alternates, so you don't have to have an election. If you explain to them that if they're an alternate, it's very likely that they'll be upgraded.
yes,
It's almost certain, and people think, well, 40 delegates don't have to show up and 40 alternates. It won't work like that. Explain that what'll happen is that 30 or 35 delegates will show, but only 5 or 10 alternates will show.
yep,
That's the way it almost always works. And so sometimes people say, okay, if I've got a good chance of being an alternate, we don't have to have an election.
yep, that's a good point. So yeah, you can use that explanation if people are hemming and hawing over volunteering to be an alternate.
Just to clarify, when you target a Senate district convention, as a lot of times I know that what he was saying, the ultimate showed up and it's virtually 100%.
Yeah,
You get out there. If your Senate district has 20 delegates and 5 don't show up, but 7 alternates show up, only 5 from that precinct can go on to be delegates, right? Or can they take some from?
you can only, it's only to your precinct.
Right.
You cannot backfill a different precinct.
Right.
Good question.
But
No, I just,
Yeah.
But the upgrading is continuous though, isn't it?
Yes.
Because, say, 10 alternates show, but they might not stay.
Mm-hmm.
And if they get upgraded and then they leave, then there's a re-upgrading, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So if you've got 40 delegate slots, 30 of the delegates show up to the convention, you've got 20 alternates that show up to the convention. The first 10 would get seated. If one of those 10 alternates realizes, oh shoot, I've got to go pick up my kids or something, then the 11th alternate would then get upgraded as well. So,
Is there a possibility a delegate knows ahead of time they can't come, so there's a process where someone, the first rated alternate could be called ahead of time, or?
there is, yes. If they get in touch with the Senate district, they can let us know and we'll take care of sending up that information to the first alternate. And they can get in touch with us through our webpage.
But otherwise, alternates just can show up hoping that they get upgraded.
Yep, and if they show up, they're rather likely to get upgraded.
Okay.
Alright, jumping back to page, we're at the bottom of page 11, so let's jump over to page 12 now. This section is, this page is just for Richfield. This is the exact same process for the Hennepin County Convention. So pretty much it's honestly just a copy of the same script. You're just gonna read, you're allocated a certain number of delegates for the Hennepin County Convention. This, if there was anywhere that you were most likely to encounter a walking sub-caucus situation or contested, or more delegate candidates and seats, it would be in this situation, because you are electing a county commissioner for District 5, right?
Correct.
Yes. So most of the time, if you see it, it would be in these kinds of situations. So do be prepared for needing to do a walking sub-caucus here or a paper ballot here.
Yeah, it's a much smaller number of delegates for the Hennepin County Convention. Most of the Richfield precincts only get 2 and 2 alternates. I think two gets 3 and 3 alternates. So that seems to me that's more interest in that. My experience has not been that that's not been the case, but you could run into that.
No, that's just the Richfield one that we have, right?
Yes. Yep. Minneapolis, you could just skip page 12.
I don't understand, why wouldn't we be electing delegates?
We fell under District 4 with County Commissioner Angela Conley, and she was elected 2 years ago. So her term isn't up yet.
Also, there's no there are no county-wide offices up. Again, the county sheriff and the county attorney were 2 years ago. So it's just basically the suburban county commissioners that are up for election this year.
So if a Minneapolis resident were to go to the county convention, they would be able to vote on the agenda and the rules. So if there's somebody who really, really cares about that stuff, we can arrange to have them get a delegate slot. But other than that, there wouldn't be any vote for them to participate in at the county convention. And the county doesn't do resolutions either, so. But again, if somebody's really dying to spend their Saturday, have them call me. They might be a friend.
That's the pull quote.
Huh?
That's the pull quote. That's the frameable quote.
Thanks. Okay, so then for Minneapolis folks, Richfield, you can just tune me out here, but we do have a Minneapolis City Convention, so we don't leave empty-handed here. Minneapolis City Convention, we've been allocated delegates. Actually, hopefully you'll notice in your speeches, it lists the number of delegates that you get, so in a Richfield script, even if you accidentally just kind of kept on reading, it would say that you were allocated 0 city delegates. So have a couple of stops in there to make sure. But it'll list the number of delegates that you get from the front page. Then we've got the affirmative action outreach and inclusion statement. And then the procedures that are very similar to the procedures for the Senate District Convention, which is if there's no contest, you can ask for a voice vote to elect everybody who is running as a delegate. Otherwise, you can go through the same procedures, walking sub-caucuses or paper votes for the contested seats. So that actually takes us to the bottom of page 14 and up to the top of page 15. The next section is related to convention committees. Conventions take a lot of work to put on. We've got a lot of different tasks that need to be handled. And so we need to ask for folks that are willing to serve on pre-convention committees, which are the people who help us with planning those. Senate District 63, we have 6 pre-convention committees. One is the Constitution, where we consider any changes to our district constitution or bylaws. This does not need to be proposed by the changes do not need to be proposed by anybody. They can even just email the Constitution Committee members 2 years ago, I think we changed it to include the position of a technology chair on our executive board, and for the better, I think. We've drastically improved our website and digital communication capabilities by having an additional person on the board, so it's really been nice. We've also, and just the ability to take on more work and stuff is always more is better there. Then we've also got the nominations committee. This is a person who interviews candidates for the leadership positions. So chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, outreach director, and technology director are the 6 positions for leadership. Plus, there are some SCC director positions, which are people that are able to go to the state conventions and such and whatnot. Sorry, Martin.
Are these being on a committee, you have to be a delegate to the convention?
No, anybody can be a delegate, or anybody can be on a committee.
And it's a one-time thing, right?
One-time
Just the
thing.
one day.
Yep.
And you can be both, you can be a delegate and also be on one of these committees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It's a one-time thing. You meet on Saturday, March 7th from 1 to 3.
So that's the initial meeting for.
Okay, you're right. It's,
So
there's work, but yes.
So there'll be an initial meeting where all the conventions get together, and then they'll kind of break out into their little committees, and then decide how they're gonna proceed from there. So some committees might only meet once or twice, depending on the business, if there's not a huge, like Amy mentioned the Constitution Committee, if there's not huge changes to the Constitution, they may only meet one time and decide that. Other committees, like resolutions, nominations, especially are gonna meet multiple times, but that will be decided at this initial meeting.
Yes, that's true.
Generally, the credentials committee is checking people in also. If you're not a delegate, sometimes that helps, because you can sit there checking people in and out while the convention goes on. But if you're a delegate, you can't really sit at the credentials table checking people in, because you've also got to be on the floor.
That's a good point, yeah.
So, and also the arrangements committee, I mean, you have to be there on the day of the convention. A certain hour or two before to set it all up and get the signs all up, so just know that there's.
Yeah, good point, yes.
Those two things are kind of.
Yeah, so that actually, and that brings us in, so the credentials committee, their job is to verify that everybody who comes in to the convention and goes into the auditorium, who says that they're a delegate, appear on the delegate list, and should a particular precinct be short of 2 delegates, and taking care of upgrading those alternates who have come. The resolutions committee, we'll get to that in just a little bit, but at our caucuses, we allow people to pass resolutions about things that they would like to see the DFL party platform put more emphasis on, or change the party platform about it. One particular issue has been union mining groups versus environmental groups, so that's an area that we see a lot of resolutions around each year, because not necessarily from the cities, but from greater Minnesota. We've got both union folks who are involved in the DFL and an environmental caucus, so we see a lot of back and forth there. But some other issues that likely come up are housing, related to housing, both public and affordable housing, family policies, so related to maternity leave or family leave or minimum wage, that kind of thing. So all of those are different resolutions that can be presented at the caucuses. This committee will then review those, consolidate ones that may be duplicates, organize them for consideration at the convention and such. The arrangements committee, they plan the physical layout of the convention and help prepare the convention space. So there's a lot of papers that we put out for the convention. The arrangements committee helps with that. The rules and agenda committee, it's basically just creating that sheet that basically drafting this is what the rules and agenda committee does. So, and I see a question there.
what order, who decides the order to deal with the resolutions?
The resolutions committee does. You mean the order in
Give
which
an
they're
order?
considered?
In our caucus, there's no definite order.
That's correct,
Once it goes to the next level, it gets put into an order. Is that
yeah. Yep, so,
So we have, if we're a convener, we have the
discretion,
ultimate
yeah.
responsibility of deciding which resolution has the most, who's most important.
Well, and ideally, when you're convening, any resolution that gets brought forward in your caucus will get heard and voted on. We'll get to that in a second. There might be somebody who belligerently tries to get an adjournment early, but generally, every resolution will get heard. It's just a matter of how long you allow for speeches on it and such. So these 6 committees for our convention, the pre-convention committees will meet on Saturday, March 7th. Possibly a little bit more work involved, but I hope we gave you a good enough of a background that you can explain it if anybody in your caucus has questions about what each one entails. You'll just ask for any takers who wants to come to the different committees. There's 2 people per precinct. So if there's 4 people that want to serve on the Constitution Committee, for instance, then you would have to do a walking sub-caucus or paper vote again. It very rarely happens. Yes.
Question about like accommodations, inclusion, like translation. Has it happened where somebody comes and says that like English is their first
That
language?
is a very good accessibility thing. So another unfortunately cost prohibitive item, including childcare at caucuses and at convention, is translation services. Minnesota requires that all translators be certified, so that way they don't just come in and say whatever they want to say. They are certified that they will provide true and accurate translation. Fortunately, that bumps the cost up to about $75 or $80 an hour, which is extremely expensive and just not something that we can afford on our shoestring budget. However, we are going to work on being able to provide what we call a friendly translator, which is somebody who is not certified but is bilingual in the language that person speaks, and try to arrange for them to be able to sit next to each other or that sort of thing. When we post our Facebook event, we'll make a little note about that. So if you do know somebody who does not speak English or English is their second language and they're not as strong in it, if they can reach out to us ahead of time, we can try and arrange a friendly translator. We just can't provide official translation services. Yeah.
Could we ask somebody in our caucus to be a friendly translator?
Yes, absolutely. And we highly encourage that. We're hoping in cases where people do need a friendly translator that they will reach out to us ahead of time so we can try and have somebody there. But if they know someone, or even if they want their 12-year-old kid to do that, we can have them serve as friendly translators.
I'm sorry, I have to go.
Oh, that's fine. Yes, thank you for coming. Any questions about accessibility and such like that? We will have our site coordinators make sure that accessibility to elevators and such is available. In the past, we've had instances where the wing of the school where the elevators were was locked off, and so we're trying to get ahead of that and make sure that we're on top of any accessibility concerns. But if you do have something that you thought of, please feel free to send it to us, and we'll make sure to include that in our considerations for both caucuses and convention. Okay, bottom of page 15. The City of Minneapolis also, the convention also has pre-convention committee meetings. They haven't found a time yet, but if people are interested in getting involved in that, there's a yellow sheet for them to sign up for that. Resolutions is the last big thing that you'll consider in your caucus. This is, we kind of went over this a little bit already, but it's things that we'd like to see the DFL platform focus on. We do recommend that you limit speakers and debates on those, otherwise something where that could be particularly contentious, you could run into, you know, people trying to speak for almost an hour or something like that. So, in the suggested script, we recommend that the convener, before presenting the resolutions, that you ask for some rules to be proposed governing the presentation. So you can ask the audience to propose parameters like a limit of 2 or 3 speakers on each side of the issue, with a 90-second limit on each speaker's time, limited rebuttals to, and that sort of thing. We do recommend that you as the convener read the resolution, just as a way to keep it level and prevent any side commentary or additional background information being added, which can make it take a very long time. You also, as the convener, do, if somebody hands you most resolutions are written in the format of where the justification for it is a whereas clause, so whereas XYZ, whereas ABC, whereas DEF, be it proposed or be it resolved, and then they get to the statement of what they would like to have included in the platform. Okay, sometimes you'll get a resolution that has 3 pages of whereas clauses. As caucus chair and the convener, you have discretion over how many of those you read. You are able to provide a summary of it. You are allowed to say that folks can read it on their own time, or read it on their own if they're interested, but you're not going to say all of them out loud. So when you do that, we do recommend doing those rules, just to make sure that you're not there until midnight. Then you'll read read the resolution. You'll eventually, you'll hear the speakers on each side of the issue. You'll hear a motion for passage or passage on it, and the tellers will take the votes. So these are very simple votes. It's just yay or nay, yes or no. And your secretary will record on the resolution form whether it was passed or not. Every resolution does have to have a resolution form, either paper clipped to it or written in the actual form itself, so that we can keep track of the clerical stuff. So, yeah.
So 2 years ago at my caucus, there was some new thing with like 6 resolutions that were all prepared.
Yeah.
And part of me was like really impressed. But I was also thinking, wow, like if this takes like 10 minutes per resolution, that's an hour of the time. I was really happy that I was able to get everything done with the governor everything like in 90 minutes. And I'm like, sweet, everything's done, I'm ready to go home. And then what's happening? And I thought, wow, like this is gonna take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Is there any way around that, or are we just stuck dealing with each and every person that wants to do a resolution, even if they're kind of similar? Like, do I have any discretion to be like, sure, we're gonna talk about this resolution, but that one is just so similar or so out of bounds what we just heard that we're not gonna do it? Do I have any discretion, or do I have to?
You can, what you can do is make a suggestion by saying, I'll entertain a motion to combine these 2 resolutions as one, or something to that effect, if they're very similar. Additionally, our last section here, which is adjournment, I mentioned that there are some people who can do this in a belligerent way or something. Adjournment can be called at any time after 8 p.m. Whether the business is done or not, anybody can call that. So if you're getting to the point where people are introducing their 12th resolution and everybody's eyes are starting to, their heads are starting to nod or whatever, you as chair can say, given the lateness of the hour, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So you can make that suggestion, or, if somebody who is any attendee can make a motion to adjourn, even if there are still resolutions to be considered. Obviously, you want to do that with a degree of tact, and, because we want to make sure that the issues that are important to people do get considered. But you're right, in some instances there are, 5 or 6 resolutions introduced about very similar aspects of the same topic. So you can make suggestions, and by using that phrase, the chair will entertain a motion to, combine all these resolutions into one, pertaining to healthcare or something like that. Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen too is that if someone it's usually if they're bringing a big stack of resolutions, like someone else may be there with the same exact one, because usually they're pre-done by like, you know,
Union groups.
right, or environmental groups or whatever, so taking them from them and saying, I am going to read them.
Yes.
Helps that a lot, because oftentimes too, if you have 6 resolutions and there doesn't need to be any discussion, they just get approved and moved on, and it's
Yes.
not that big of a deal. So then, even if you have 6 or 7 resolutions, it's not gonna take you an hour, because you just vote and they're approved, so. But I made the mistake one time of having people read their own resolutions and never again will that
Yeah.
happen.
Yes, so yeah, we do include in here, some text or some, scripts on how to insist that you be the one to read the resolutions, which give you the chance to screen them and therefore suggest, okay, these are duplicates, so I'm going to entertain a motion to combine them, or, you know, these ones are similar, I'm gonna entertain a motion to combine them, that sort of thing. So, yeah, so, and, at the end, just, you know, a quick text to say to everybody, remember that next Tuesday is the Minnesota primary for the presidential race. Tell all your friends, Caucus for Congress, primary for president, just a good way to remember it. At the end of the night, just return the room to its previous setup. We don't want to be bad to mean to our schools, because teachers have enough on their plate as is. Recycle any scrap paper. Any leftover candidate literature or blank forms, just bring them back with your packet. Oh, so this is important. The caucus packets do need to be returned that night. If it's just impossible for you to be able to do that, please contact myself or Isaac and we'll make arrangements, but we do need to get that information back.
Why not just?
I mean, if you're willing to field the CNN calls.
Sorry.
With your tellers, count all of the out-of-pocket donations that are in the plastic bag. Do not open the PCR donations. We'll have our treasurer take care of that. So those just put in the envelope and we'll take care of opening those. But count any of the just loose cash and stuff like that. Verify it with your tellers, and then did everybody get Sharpies as well, or no? No. Okay. I'm gonna, Mary, would you mind passing those boxes? We'll give you Sharpies as well for writing signs, and also write the total amount that has been verified by you and one of your tellers on the plastic bag in a Sharpie.
And were the hurricanes?
Huh?
Were the hurricanes?
Yes, that too. And then you're going to take all the information, all the packet information. If you want, you can just, if you're unsure about whether to bring something back to us or not, err on the side of caution and just throw it in your packet. We've got a recycling bin that we can use as well. So otherwise, on your inventory sheet, there is a third column. So the first column is for you to go through right now, or right now we're in a little bit here, and make sure that you've got all the materials that you need. So you'll do a check here to make sure you've got everything. The return check is for us when we're collecting the information. We're going to be having a party. So come one, come all, please, and invite those who are precinct chairs and vice chairs to come as well. It's going to be at Representative Gene Wagenius's house, which is 4804 11th Avenue South. I've got the address here. Anything that has an NA in the return column, you can just recycle yourself. But again, if there's any question or anything, just err on the side of caution and return it to us, and we'll take care of the recycling then. Everything that's got a blank, though, we do need to have returned back to us. Please fill out the, there's also another sheet that, bear with me, the summary report sheet. This one looks a lot